Hello, Cadre. This is another PowerPoint audio in the series for 930 curriculum instruction and assessment. And this is about something that I think needs to be part of the conversation when we try to take standards and translate them into classroom practice. The thing I hear all over the state is unpacking the standards or unpacking the objectives or whatever it might happen to be, unpacking the curriculum. And there's a bothersome piece of that I don't necessarily want to indicate that that's bad practice. It just isn't sufficient to do what you want to do in terms of a guaranteed and viable curriculum, a balanced curriculum, and so forth. So let me use this as the model. When you go to talk about unpacking the standards, the starting place is the standard. Each standard is taken and you begin to unpack that in terms of how do you do that? Well, you set a learning outcome. How do you do that? You set an instructional objective. How do you do that? You decide on a content piece. There's the how of the content is, okay, what knowledge, what skill, what dispositions, and you get down to those levels of content as to defining what the curriculum is supposed to be in order to meet that particular standard. And the problem with that is that you can teach all of that content and you may still not grasp what that standard is all about. Just because kids know all the pieces and parts of something doesn't mean they get the whole of it. And I think the whole or holistic approach to standards is what the Common Core was all about, to try to reinvigorate that conversation around the standards are bigger than the words themselves kind of thing. And so people talk about unpacking the standards. I think they need to talk about repacking the standards. In other words, there's nothing wrong with taking the standard and trying to get down to the content, skill, and disposition pieces of it as to what teachers are to teach. But then you need to go back up and take those content pieces, knowledge, skill, and disposition, and begin to repack them and then ask the question, well, why are we teaching that? In other words, what is that instructional objective? And then does it match to the unpacking side? Then why is that an instructional objective? Well, what's the learning outcome? Does it match to the unpacking side? And then why do we do that? Because this is the standard, and does that match in terms of the wording of it? So that if you align both sides of that, you have a better chance of getting a coherent and rational kind of curriculum. But the piece that the repacking does and should do that the part on the unpacking side cannot do is the final question isn't the standards. And it starts there on the unpacking side, but can't finish there on the repacking side, because what I think we need to be talking about in our schools is, okay, so that's the content. Those are the instructional objectives, the learning outcomes, the standards. What is supposed to be the experience of the student in learning those things? What does that look like in terms of the kind of classroom they're in terms of the kind of instructional materials they have, in terms of the knowledge, skills, and disposition that they should come out of there with? What about that sense of themselves as a learner and the ability to learn independently and to learn constructively and to begin to look at divergent things that interest them as they begin to learn a particular content piece or standard piece and so forth. So what I'm guessing my point is that in the unpacking, we tend to narrow it down to content and leave it there. When we repack, we basically have an opportunity to look at, are those things parallel? And did we make decisions going up and asking why that we did going down and asking how? And then what about that experience of the student that's larger than the content, larger than the instructional objective, larger than the learning outcome, and larger than the standard? What is that student supposed to look like, be able to do, have feelings or attitudes about them, about their learning, and about what it is that they just learned? So I'm an advocate for unpacking the standards, but completing that by repacking them and getting up to that question of what is the experience level of the student.